Uganda. We live?
We are live.
Yeah. So it's crazy. Uganda, African country, uh, and they just passed a really controversial law, um, putting a tax on social media. So I couldn't find out if it was. I was looking for the information on if it was every time you logged on, or just like if you log on for the day they charge you. But it's about. I think it's called 200. I think it's 200 shillings, which is about 5 cents.
Hmm.
Um, I thought this was like very smart. What did
Yeah,
you think?
I have mixed views on it. In one so, um, in one sense, I think first off, a lot of times I don't think people appreciate that social media is free and how much of it we use, like compared to like TV or something like that, and how much time it takes up from our day. So I think we should all kind of
Right.
take. But so like I was talking about this a little bit the other day when I was high, and I think I was kind of going off on a non sequitur, but like a lot of stuff. I think Africa is really going to start emerging as this bigger part of the world in the next 20
You
years.
you said that you said that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and I huge part of it is just that they kind of like skipped this whole part where everybody was getting computers and getting on the internet, but now everybody's moving to phones. And the part of the reason Apple buys up all your phone, like if you get a new iPhone, they buy your old iPhone back. They sell it again in Africa. So they're all getting these cheap older phones and they're trying to turn them into phone consumers, and it's changing the way a lot of them have money. And there's a couple countries where people trade minutes and shit on their phone as the currency instead of the country's currency. So they're all on there, and or a lot of them are on there more than anything ever like this before. So it's definitely a way for that country to generate money. But in the same sense, in one sense, I feel like they're probably just not used to getting taxed. In the U.S., taxes are hidden very well. We're taxed to fucking shit, and some other places even a lot more, like in Europe and stuff. It's
Yeah,
not.
if you ever look at your cell phone bill in detail, there's so many taxes and surcharges on there. It is absolutely insane. But
It's
anyway, I'm
fucking
sorry.
crazy. No, you're
Yeah.
100% right, and everything we get is taxed multiple times.
Yep.
I'm not a fan of the guy or anything. What's that dude? Ron Paul, Rand Paul, whichever one of those. He talks about that a lot. I think he's wrong about a lot of stuff, but that is just an important criticism he points out. Is like, yo, when you get fucking a car that you bought, not only was it taxed at they built it in multiple places, and every time it was shipped, it was taxed for shipping, and then there was probably some manufacturing tax, and then when they bought this piece for the car, they got taxed on the sale, and then when you buy the car has a tax, so you're paying for all those taxes before they're trying to make money back from, plus the tax on the thing you're getting, like. So they compound in a way that people don't really consider if you think about it. So it's not that crazy. Maybe they're just not that used to getting taxed, but in the same sense, 5 cents to someone in Uganda, I'm sure, I don't know the numbers, probably a lot more than 5 cents is to me.
And that's what I was just thinking in my head while I was listening to you. I also had the thought of, before I said that I thought it was so smart, I didn't think about somebody who was, and I'm sure probably a large portion of that country is probably in poverty. That would be really hard for them. And social media is an important way of
It's a
transferring
huge
information.
aspect. Right, it's a huge aspect of them coming to another level. A lot of people don't take it seriously. A lot of people think you're on some weird new agey shit.
Yeah.
You're a like, you give me a lot of wisdom being, a guy that's older than me and knowing and just seeing more. I think if you're older, wisdom is different than smartness. Not that you're not smart, but I mean, like, there's something different you get from it. You know what I mean? But
No,
one
yeah.
thing that I do always like, and I don't think it's me being young, is when older people are really dismissive of a lot of new technology. And I'm like, I don't think you guys appreciate how crazy these fucking things are.
So let me give you a quick sidebar on that. This is gonna be a quick little tangent. So I rap, and I've been rapping for a long time. Okay,
Right.
I was a really late embracer of technology. So when I graduated college in 2008. I came to Arizona in 2009. I was 23 years old. I was still rapping. I rapped while I was in college, but I didn't take it as seriously. So what I started doing was I took my cell phone. I would play a beat in the background. I'd write a bunch of stuff to it. I would go into the bathroom. I would record myself in the mirror rapping all of this stuff, right? And then I would put it on YouTube. What I didn't realize was that they had these kits where you could basically get a microphone, recording software, and like
Like a little
a
bundle.
interface. A interface, yeah, you could get those for like $100.
Right.
And
Good
so
enough to
that's
start with.
but I didn't understand that that's where technology was at, right? So when I got with my girl, when I got with my wife, she went out and just bought it for me. She's like, "Hey, I know you love doing this. Like, it's easier than you're making it hard on yourself. Look, just use this." And so it blew my mind that I was so unaware of something so simple. And so that's kind of the point that you're making. Like,
Right.
but like for me, even on a day-to-day basis, like I think the older you get, I mean, I'm not that old obviously either, but the older you get, like you don't want to deal with learning new shit.
Right. You have a resistance to it. You've learned so much, and you've also learned that a lot of stuff is bullshit. You know what I mean? So maybe this is bullshit too. And I just, but for me, it's the writing on the wall. I'm a big like. I know that you know, like I've invested in like real estate and Bitcoin. Not everything, but there's like I've got some money in a couple places. And I know for me, I think people try to look at a lot. And I'm not saying there's no place for the bean counting and looking at all the numbers and everything, but just think of where the world is going. I can tell you for sure we're all going to be talking, like, even if you know, I know we talked about voice things the other day and you won't want like a smart thing in your house. I guarantee you we're going to be using Google Assistant and talking to our phones a lot more, and it's going to be happening a lot more in the future. So I'd invest in things like that. You know what I mean? Like, just think of where the world's going. And I could tell you this, like, for instance, Aaron has a guy who's actually danced for one of Kate's songs too, called Pop and Poker. I've reposted some of his stuff. He's from Uganda, and he hit him up, and he's just like, I just love to dance. So now I've got a phone, I film myself dancing, and he's really good at dancing to people's music. He makes a little bit of money doing it, and he's just growing online. And that's just something that would have never happened before.
Right. And you know what? So here's another piece of this story that I did some reading on it, and it's interesting. So some of the constituents of Uganda are mad because it feels like that's basically infringing on their free speech.
And I do.
And so neighboring countries, Tanzania and Kenya, both have similar laws. And so Tanzania has a law that charges $650 to any blogger or online publisher. So if you publish things online, and I don't know if the 650 is like a flat fee or if it's like every time you post something, but that's to me. If you're like an independent guy like myself, I ain't trying to pay $650 to post something.
Right.
And then Kenya has a law. I'm forgetting it. Oh no, they have a law that basically charges people, like you can be arrested for posting fake news.
Oh,
So
shit.
if they find out you have a article that somehow is false, you can go to jail for 2 years.
And they get to decide what's fake. Scary
Exactly.
about
So
that.
so what I kind of missed before I gave you my answer on this is kind of controlling free speech a little bit. I mean,
And
you are.
it's also stifling the economy if you really think about it in a really harsh way. You can't put a number on what free speech, creativity, and not just for expression does for a country. If you look at what like the Enlightenment did, you can't put a number on. If you go look at the Sistine Chapel, you know what I mean? Which I know that's a little bit of a stretch, but if you go look at the Sistine Chapel in Europe, which they built forever ago, that wasn't necessarily made of materials or gold or anything that's necessarily intrinsically worth something, and we can't even put a number on what it's worth. We think it's invaluable. So for all these people now all of a sudden to have a way to film themselves, record themselves, do all these other things, they're stopping the ones that are maybe going to start that podcast that could maybe make them a lot of money and maybe help them grow outside of this country. You know what I mean?
I see what you did there. I see what you did there. So what the officials are saying in Uganda, they're saying that they're trying to avoid taking on debt from other countries, and so they're trying to come up with creative ways to be able to fund some of the infrastructure that they need. So I can almost get behind that because think about it, like if like you said, you think Africa in the future will be a really emerging nation. Well, they can't do that if they have a lot of debt.
Well, in the same sense, like uh, a lot of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa are just the governments are barely governments, and you know what I mean. It's just it's a constant retold story of they're just selling out their people for whatever it is, the resources in their country. There's a lot of those countries people forget, like as the world kind of got to where it is right now, it was colonized, and a lot of them, even though technically they're not, they're independent still. In a lot of senses, the way they're very much controlled by our government in the same way we control, like, if you see that movie Sicario where they kind of talk about how the government controls the cartels because they can't stop the cartels from existing, but it's easier to control one or two big guys on top. That's a lot of what goes on in a lot of these governments, and it's not just us too. Russia's very much involved in Africa, and so is China. You know what I mean? Like, so I think this might have a lot to do with that. Maybe they're seeing the writing on the wall. I don't know necessarily who exactly is behind it, but I don't necessarily. I just think we got to see a lot more before I think. Yes, the governments do need to generate some money and everything like that, but I don't know if a lot of these. I think the horse is good. If you think about it like an analogy, like horse racing, do you bet on the horse or the jockey, the person riding it, or the actual thing? I think these countries and the people in them and what's going on there on the ground level, a lot of good things are going to happen. But up top, I think they're just the jockey isn't really there yet. The people leading it, you know what I mean?
Well, I guess I would just want to see what it generated. And I do think that we're oversaturated with social media. So I like it from the standpoint that, like, we do need to take a step back. And if you were getting charged, I know if I was getting charged, I'd post and view a lot less stuff.
I
So
would.
there's a combination of things. I think the ends will tell us a better story of how well they do and what effect it has on their culture. Unfortunately, they probably won't have any sociological reports coming out of there to tell us how it affected, their youth population. Because I think social media really can negatively impact our youth population from the ages of like 9 to 19,
Oh,
where
for sure.
so I do think if you cut back on some of that, people will be a little more mentally healthy.
I would
So
say, honestly, I feel about it very similar to what I was telling you the other day, where I think porn is actually kind of out of control with younger people. Not necessarily it's the greatest social evil or the biggest problem, but I think for some people it's a huge problem, and I think for many it's more of a vice than they recognize.
right,
You
yeah,
know,
and I think social media is the same thing.
right?
I think
Yeah, I think they're exactly the same in that.
yeah, and so that's why I thought that's why my first reaction to this was like, nah, that's cool. Like it needs to
Mm-hmm.
be controlled. This is because they had to make a tax in New York City a couple years back. They charged like $1.30 tax on any sugar drink over 32 ounces.
Right, I remember that.
And so people were up in arms, but I'm thinking, have you looked at half of this population? We're a bunch of fat people. Well, most
Right,
of
we're
us.
one of the fattest countries on earth. I think it's
Exactly.
good. I
So,
thought it
so,
was good.
and so that's my point with this. Like, I think that $1.30 tax makes sense because
I
you
don't think
got
it's any different than taxing cigarettes.
exactly. So that's my point. That's why at first I'm like, that's not that bad, and I still kind of feel like it's not a horrible decision. I think as long as they don't get outrageous with what they're taxing. If you charge 5 cents for one sign on for one day, like if it's 5 cents a day, I'm cool with that. But
Right.
if it's 5 cents per log on, that's crazy.
Right, that would be fucking crazy. Yeah, I don't know exactly. I don't even know. It comes to the other thing. Like, how do you even track that? It's like there's a government tracker on my phone that tells me
Well,
how many
the
times I
government is
logged in.
tracking your phone anyway, so yeah,
Right, but I mean, then they have to admit it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I
Well,
think and then you actually have to go through with it, which I think is a whole nother thing.
I mean, remember when they passed the Patriot Act, where basically they've given themselves permission to record every conversation on Earth? You remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I remember that.
So like they've already told us. I mean, people forget because it's not talked about every day. But there's literally an act that already says they can do whatever they want with whatever conversation you have.
There's a lot of crazy shit like that, man. If you look up I looked up the Second Amendment like a couple weeks ago when I don't know, I ended up looking a bunch of random shit up, got on a Wikipedia hole, and I was reading this thing about, or not the Second Amendment, the right to free speech, and it's actually in there. If the government saw that it's actually not actually the right to free speech. It's completely figurative, and you don't have the right. The government can't tell you what not to say. It's actually like an amendment law. I was like, wow, that's pretty. That's directly what it says. So I was like, whoa, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, and that's the uninformed. You inform yourself, you learn the truth about things, you start seeing things differently. So yeah, I like what they did here in Uganda. I think our country would burn down the capital if they did that shit here.
Yeah.
But but
You know what actually would
all
happen?
right, let's move.
I
What's
bet
up?
you a lot of people would pay it too. To be honest, if they did it here, people would be
I
mad. But yeah, I'd probably pay it. Like, I'd be really pissed, and then it's like, we gotta go to war, and it's like, I'll just pay the 5 fucking cents. Let me get my fucking Instagram.
And it's so it's so minuscule. You're like, man, whatever. You know, you're like,
Exactly. It's
ah.
so easy to fucking forget. When you put in your credit card once, and then your kid logs in and makes 8 more Instagrams or some shit. Oh man, that could get out of control.
Or like if they charge per log on, by the end of the month you logged on like 1,700 times. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like,
Fuck.
and you don't realize it. You know. Uh,
Oh
let's
shit. We'll
move
get in
on.
that next one.
With